If an action-adventure ARPG set in the Victorian era featuring gothic aesthetics and detective element is your thing, then Silver Palace might be worth looking into. Hey everyone, Rexlent here. In this video, I'll be doing a brief review of Silver Palace, which is currently holding its first ever beta test, and all I can say is it's very promising. If you don't know, 8 months ago, Silver Palace released a teaser video, and many people, including myself, said that the graphics looked a bit too good to be true. Well, all I can say is that they lived up to the hype, and in some cases, the beta actually looks better than that trailer. I streamed the beta for about 6 hours straight, exploring most aspects of the game, and I will break down my first impressions in various aspects, the good parts about it, and also the parts where there is room for improvement. And only the female detective is available for this beta test, but you also get to name them both. Basically, the male and female detectives are siblings and are strongly tied to the overarching plot of the story. Right after you're done deciding your character name, you're thrown straight into a boss battle with Cinderella. The combat is arena style. You lock onto the enemy and spam your basic attack or skill when it's ready, and there is dodging as well as parry in this game. And interestingly enough, they are both bound to the same button, which is the shift key. Tap once for parry and double tap for dodge. You can kinda tell that the game put quite a bit of effort into combat cinematics with dynamic cameras and QTE events. Very interesting QTE events and camera angles. This part in particular was difficult for me to clear, but after much willpower, I overcame Cinderella. And that's where we kick off into the city of Silvernia. So just for this beta, the game is mostly set in this sandbox-styled city. It's relatively not that large, but it's also extremely dense. You'll come across gothic architecture and find interesting things within the nooks and crannies of the city, like the alleyways and even the rooftops, but I'll get to those later. So in the first section, I'll talk about the core gameplay. Like we've seen in the opening fight with Cinderella, combat is pretty easy to pick up while also having a certain depth to it. You have your basic attack, a charge attack, which is holding down basic attack, a skill, which is usually available after performing enough basic attacks, and an ultimate. As mentioned earlier, parrying is pressing shift once and dodging is pressing it twice. Skills that have a yellow circle can be parried, whereas for red circles, you want to dodge to get out the way. Once you've parried enough or dealt enough damage, the enemy will be stunned and then you get to perform an execution. You can use up to 4 characters in a team, and this is how combat is done. You attack the enemies with a combination of your basic attack, skill, and ultimate, and the gauge at the bottom center of the screen is gonna fill up, and then you can store up to 3 full charges of it. What do these charges do? For each charge, you can switch another character in, and they are gonna perform their ambush skill. So, majority of the combat revolves around this ambush, which is a powerful attack that usually staggers the target, and most of the equipment in the game also centers around this. There is also a modular feature called reactors, where you equip nodes based on your team composition to further increase the potency of ambush skills, adding more buff and debuff effects and even healing. So yeah, now you can see that everything revolves around ambush. Like once you perform ambush, all the effects activate with the character. So as you can see, combat is pretty straightforward. You just attack and use skill to whittle down your HP, switch to ambush and ultimate when it's ready to take away the rest of the fight. You can further switch it up by using characters who excel at different things. For example, we have Argos, who can provide healing for the team while also being a melee character, and Furtho, whose gimmick is to drain her own HP to provide a massive attack buff to the team. So there is some synergy already going on just between the two of them. The detective excels in melee, and when her meter is filled, she can also unload bullets at the enemies. We also have other specialized ranged characters like Alf, who wields a shotgun and also headbutts when she's out of shells, or Cinderella, yep, she's playable, who has a light machine gun. So they're all good for different situations. Some enemies are constantly flying, and that's when you really want ranged weapons to counter them and such. There are also attributes, aka roles in this game, like Hero, Guardian and such, as well as elements going from Ignis, Glacis, etc. Your usual element wheel consisting of fire, ice, lightning, and so forth. The beta hasn't really gone too in-depth on these yet. Lastly, there's something called Silvercrafts. It's basically a little drone that helps you in battle, while also providing buffs to the team. For example, this pinnate letter opener grants 12% crit damage whenever it attacks. Progression-wise, if you're familiar with recent gacha games, it's the usual stamina-based farming system where you enter domains to get materials to level up and break through characters and gear, as well as your world level, So there is a lot of familiarity in this style. That's all you need to know, and I won't go too much into it. But yeah, that's about it for combat. I think the main appeal for me is looking at the ultimate animations, and in some cases, characters have unique execution animations against certain enemies. Now for its flaws, there are a few things. Number 1, the field of view, aka FOV, is really small. As you can see, the camera is fixed behind the character and it's not at all dynamic. This means that when you're fighting agile enemies or a group of enemies, they have a tendency to be outside of the frame, and this issue worsens, especially when they're attacking you from off-screen. There is still a little arrow indicator telling you that an attack is coming, but it's not very precise, so all you can do is either quickly dodge out of the way and reposition yourself so that they stay within the screen, or you just press parry and pray. So yeah, the small FOV really messes with your spatial awareness. Hopefully the developers can alleviate this by increasing the FOV and maybe not having the camera be too static. The second point being the parry system. You take a bit of damage for each successful parry, which doesn't really make sense to me. At least in my experience, that sounds more like blocking, except that you still need to time it. In which case, sometimes it's safer to just dodge out of harm's way given its invincibility frames. You cannot actually die from parrying and the game would just leave you at 1 HP. But from a design standpoint, I think parrying is a risk to reward thing and shouldn't be penalized with HP loss for catching the timing. But yeah, just these 2 points really stood out for me for combat, and since it's just the first CBT, I don't want to be too harsh about it. Hopefully the devs can address this, and that's it for combat. For the next part, the exploration. We were able to traverse a part of the city of Silvernia. You can choose to go on foot or on your mount. That's right, we get a Pegasus mount right away, and it's pretty easy to mount and dismount. Simply press space to get on the mount and then press V to dismount. You can even drift with the Pegasus, giving you a tiny speed boost when you make your turns. So there are a couple of things you can do in the world. Exploration, side quests, optional bosses. I fought them and defeated them while underleveled. Hell yeah. And of course, the main story. You can inspect your surroundings and people around you by simply holding left click, and this is also how you pick up presence of enemies. The radar will flash red, signifying an enemy nearby, and then you scan the sussy target and start the battle. As for exploring the buildings, there are 2 ways to scale the rooftops. Number 1, you grab Pegasus and look for these boost pads, which launches you into the air, and then you start gliding. It's sort of a glide slash flying thing. You can steer up a little bit to ascend, and then it's also based on how you pan the camera, so it's a little bit janky on this regard. You press shift to boost to spend a little bit of stamina if you want to ascend further. Touching these rings in the air will also put you into an air current that lets you go around the city. It takes a little bit getting used to flying like this, but I do wish flying was a little bit more accessible because right now, the most reliable way to do this is either launch from the pads or fast travel to a high point and then glide from there. There are a lot of puzzles and treasure chests on the rooftop, so it's a real pain if you accidentally fall off and needing to find a way to get up again. But there's no fall damage in this game, so there's no need to worry about it. The other way to get around is by looking for these purple grappling points, which is a little bit more troublesome because not every building has them, so you kinda need to run around buildings looking for them. And the path is also fixed, so they may not lead you to places you want to go. Flying is still the most direct way. Now, as for my gripe with exploration, there is just one thing. There is no jump function in this game. I wouldn't have minded as much if the game were instead a linear RPG with fixed points to go up and down around the map. I've been in situations where I couldn't make it to a platform or a ledge and ended up needing to climb or fly all the way back up again. It's situations like these that a jump feature would have greatly helped with adjusting and repositioning. And I know I'm not the only one asking for this, so hopefully the devs implement this feedback. Apart from that, Silvernia is a beautiful city. The architecture and the streets look realistic and believable. They even used a couple of classical pieces as part of their background music. Story-wise, it heavily revolves around detective work. For example, I've played up to the first act and it was about identifying the supposed charred remains of a boy. There was a lot of suspense as we picked up clues and evidence alongside the detective. The game utilizes the camera really well in the cutscenes, almost like watching a show. Some segments include recreating crime scenes where the detective goes around examining clues and making deductions. There is even an evidence board that we continually populate with clues that we find, and we can examine each clue to see how it's deduced, eventually leading to the final conclusion. The game strikes a pretty good balance at holding your hand while also keeping the story suspenseful. Not much plot was revealed in the current beta, and I got as far as I could before getting hit by a level gate, but it did a pretty good job at setting the tone and direction of the game and what we can expect. I think the writers are onto something great here in balancing the logical aspects of the detective cases while also retaining its narrative appeal. So that's something to look forward to in the future story developments. But yeah, that concludes my first impressions of Silver Palace. All in all, a really good start considering it's its first beta test. Very polished with some room for improvement, like what I said about combat FOV, also taking damage from parrying and adding the jump function. Apart from that, I think Silver Palace is worth keeping an eye on. The characters are appealing, the art direction and music are on point, and once they give the combat system a bit more polish, it's going to be perfect. Anyway, consider leaving a like, comment and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.